All right, so today we're going to unpack something truly powerful. It's a film that goes way beyond your typical Hollywood flick. We're talking Schindler's List.
Ah, Schindler's
I
List.
know you've probably seen it, but
Most people have?
yeah, we're going deep today. We're diving into WHY. It's considered a masterpiece, and how it still, hits us right in the feels all these years later.
Well, the context is really fascinating. You got to picture it, right?
Yeah.
1993, Spielberg's fresh off the success of Jurassic Park.
Yeah, dinosaurs, big,
Sure.
adventure, popcorn flick.
Right. And instead of, just riding that wave, he makes a hard pivot, takes on a black and white film about the Holocaust.
I mean, talk about a bold move. It's not exactly light entertainment.
No.
So how did Spielberg, like the king of escapism, make that leap? And what is it about Schindler's List that makes it stand out, even among other Holocaust films?
Well, you can't really talk about Schindler's List without talking about Oskar Schindler himself.
Right.
We have to remember this is based on a true story. Schindler was a real person, a German industrialist. But, well, he didn't start out as a saint, that's for sure.
Yeah, more like a war profiteer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a far cry from saving lives.
Yeah, exactly. Complex guy, gambler, womanizer. At first, he was just all about profit. It was wartime. And yet somewhere along the way, he changes, he transforms, risks everything to protect his Jewish workers.
And Liam Neeson, I mean, talk about capturing that moral ambiguity. You can see the gears turning in his head as he's grappling with his conscience.
Oh, Neeson's performance is just incredible, isn't it? He portrays the charm, the shrewdness, the darkness, but also that flicker of humanity that ultimately leads him to do, something unthinkable.
Let's talk about the black and white. Such a powerful choice. I mean, you don't see that every day, especially for a big Hollywood movie.
Right, it's a stroke of genius. By getting rid of color, the film takes on this timeless quality. Like you're watching a documentary from that era, pulled right from the archives. It immerses you in that grim reality, a world drained of color where hope seems lost.
Except for one really jarring moment.
Yeah.
Where color just bursts through.
Right. The little girl in the red coat.
Oh, my God.
During that horrific Krakow ghetto liquidation scene, amidst all the chaos and brutality, there she is, this one little girl in a bright red coat, and it's the only Montreal color in the entire film.
It's an image that's just seared into my memory. You're watching this horror unfold, stark black and white, and then bam, this vibrant red.
Yeah.
Like a punch to the gut.
Yeah, it's a visual hammer blow, reminding you that amidst all this organized brutality, there were children, innocent lives being extinguished.
Yeah.
It's a symbol of innocence lost, right? Like a life that should have been full of color, now reduced to just a statistic in the Nazis' horrific plan. It's deliberate, it's unsettling, and it's incredibly effective.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it's not just about Schindler, right? There are other characters, really crucial characters, who embody the full spectrum of, well, human behavior during this time.
Oh, absolutely. You've got Amon Goeth, the Nazi commandant of the Plazo camp.
Oh, God.
Chillingly portrayed by Ralph Fiennes.
Oh, Fiennes is terrifying.
He's the embodiment of casual cruelty.
Yeah.
Goeth represents the absolute worst of humanity, sadistic, power-hungry, and he seems to just, enjoy inflicting pain. To him, Jewish people are less than human, expendable. And it's just this stark, brutal contrast to Schindler's growing empathy.
And that contrast is what makes it so compelling. You see the different paths people took during this time. Some, like Goeth, consumed by evil, and others, like Schindler, finding a way to hold on to their humanity in the face of, well, unimaginable suffering.
Exactly. And then you have Itzhak Stern, Schindler's Jewish accountant,
Yeah.
played by the always brilliant Ben Kingsley.
Oh, Stern. Such a quiet, dignified presence. He almost acts as Schindler's moral compass, kind of subtly guiding him toward doing the right thing. But he's not forcing his hand. It's more like he awakens something that maybe was always there under the ambition and self-interest.
It's a fascinating dynamic, and it's also important to remember the film shows how Schindler's transformation unfolds. It's not just an overnight change. There are these moments, specific events where you see that shift taking place.
Yes. And it's not just a feel-good story, a hero swooping in. It's about moral awakening. It's about grappling with your own conscience, about realizing that the other, they're just as human as you are.
Absolutely. Confronting the banality of evil, and also about individual action, even when things are incredibly dark.
And speaking of overwhelming, we can't talk about Schindler's List without addressing the bureaucracy of genocide.
Oh, yeah.
The Nazis documented everything.
It's chilling.
It's chilling.
Turning human lives into entries on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Lists become this powerful visual motif.
Schindler's List, of course, starts as a way to maximize profit and then becomes this tool for salvation. But then you have those lists of those condemned to die,
Oh, yeah.
lists of the dead. A stark reminder of how something as mundane as a list can be used for both good and evil, how easily human lives can be reduced to numbers.
And then there's that line, that gut-wrenching line from Schindler. I could have saved more. It's been debated, analyzed for decades.
It cuts deep, doesn't it? Some people think it's sentimental, but I think it speaks to that survivor's guilt that many people, including Schindler himself, experienced. That wait, he did something extraordinary, saved lives, but it wasn't enough. You're haunted by the faces of those you couldn't reach.
Such a heavy burden to carry, that lingering sense of loss, that question, what if I'd done more?
And that's what makes this movie so much more than a historical drama. It asks difficult questions, questions that stay with you. After the credits roll, it forces us to confront not only the horrors of the past, but also our own capacity for compassion, for courage, for making a difference, however small.
We've covered a lot of ground here. Schindler's complexities, that chilling contrast with Goethe, Stern's quiet dignity, the lists, how the film uses them to highlight the just dehumanizing nature of the Nazi regime. But we've only scratched the surface of what makes Schindler's List such a masterpiece.
We haven't even gotten to the technical brilliance that Spielberg brings. The cinematography, the music, the pacing, it's just unforgettable.
Right. We need to delve into how those techniques take this story from a history lesson to this visceral emotional journey. And of course, talk about the film's legacy, its impact on Holocaust education, and why it continues to resonate with audiences today. But first, let's take a quick moment to gather our thoughts. And when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into the world of Schindler's List and those cinematic choices that make it so powerful. Okay, so we're back, ready to dive even deeper into this world that is Schindler's List. We've talked about those characters, the themes, the history, but what about the film itself, the choices that make it so impactful? I mean, you don't just stumble into making a masterpiece.
Oh, you're so right. Spielberg, he's a master storyteller. And in Schindler's List, he brings together this team of artists all at the top of their game. It's not just pointing the camera and saying action. Every single element, from the lighting to the music, is carefully crafted to create an experience for the viewer.
And we got to start with the cinematography. Janusz Kaminski, who shot the film, uses this stark, almost documentary-like style. I mean, we talked about the black and white, but it's more than just the absence of color, right?
Oh, absolutely. You see a lot of handheld camera work. It creates this sense of immediacy, like you're right there in the middle of the chaos. And often he uses natural lighting, just adding to that realism, that grittiness, the camera work. It's never flashy or distracting. It's all about serving the story, drawing you in.
And then John Williams' score. Haunting, so emotionally resonant. I get chills just thinking about it.
Oh, John Williams, a genius, no doubt. But what's so remarkable about this score is the restraint. It's not that typical, bombastic, sweeping sound we expect from him. This is more intimate, more melancholy. He relies heavily on the solo violin, and of course, it's played beautifully by Itzhak Perlman.
Oh, that violin just cuts right through you, doesn't it? It's like this mournful cry, this lament for all the lives lost.
Exactly. The music never lets you forget the gravity of what's happening, that human cost of this tragedy. And yet, amidst the sorrow, you get these glimmers of hope, moments of resilience. You hear it in the music and you see it in the characters.
Okay, so we have that stark black and white, the haunting score, the performances. But there's one scene that really, I think, showcases Spielberg's mastery, that Krakow ghetto liquidation scene.
Oh, that scene, a masterclass in building tension. Spielberg meticulously recreates that chaos, that brutality. You see families torn apart, people being herded into those cattle cars, shots ringing out. It's unsettling, but what makes it unforgettable is how he uses sound, those visual cues, to just heighten the impact.
Yes. He focuses on these specific details. A dropped doll, a mother's plea, that sound of a single gunshot echoing. And then, of course, the little girl in the red coat. A beacon of innocence amidst all that despair.
Oh, that image. Seared into our collective memory, isn't it? It's that reminder that even in the midst of that horror, there were children, innocent victims. And that single splash of color, it's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. It's Spielberg telling a story visually, making you feel the weight of history.
And all this cinematic brilliance wasn't just for show, right? Schindler's List won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. But it did so much more than just win awards. It had a profound impact.
Oh, absolutely. It didn't just entertain, it educated, it got people talking, it brought the Holocaust to a wider audience. People had to confront this chapter in history that so many had tried to forget.
It made it personal, right? It wasn't just statistics anymore, it was faces. Stories of the individuals impacted by this horrific event.
Exactly. And that's what Spielberg wanted. He wanted to make it accessible, to make it resonate, to remind us that this wasn't just something in a history book. These were real people, families, hopes and dreams, who were systematically murdered by a regime that was fueled by pure hatred and intolerance.
And then there's a criticism. Some argued it was too sentimentalized, that it focused too much on Schindler, the quote-unquote good German, at the expense of the Jewish victims.
It's a valid point. It's a debate that continues today. But you have to consider what Spielberg was trying to do. He was trying to reach a large audience, people who maybe wouldn't normally want to see a 3-hour black and white film about the Holocaust.
So a little cinematic flair was necessary to draw them in, to make them care.
Right. And even with that, Schindler's List, it's still a tough watch. Imagine if it was even more graphic, more bleak. Would it have had the same reach? Would it have sparked the same level of conversation, the same awareness?
That's a good point. It's that balance, respecting the history, showing the horrors accurately, but making it accessible.
Exactly. And Spielberg walked that line. I mean, he never shies away from the horrors, but he also shows us that courage, that resilience, that humanity shining through, even in the darkest of times.
Like with Schindler himself. He's flawed, driven by self-interest at first, but then something changes. He sees the humanity and he's transformed.
And that's the core of the film, right? That transformation. It reminds us that even when surrounded by evil, people can change. They can choose to do good. And even those small acts of kindness, like the ones you see in the film, they have this ripple effect. They save lives. They inspire others.
And that's what makes it so relevant today, isn't it? Those themes, moral awakening, standing up against injustice, seeing the humanity, they resonate so deeply in today's world.
Oh, absolutely. Look around. The rise of authoritarianism, the hate speech, the conflicts, these are not just echoes of the past. These are present-day realities. Schindler's List, it's a reminder of what can happen when hate takes hold, when we ignore the suffering of others.
So it's a warning then, a reminder of what we stand to lose if we don't learn from the past.
It's more than a warning. It's a call to action. It asks us, what would you do? Would you stand by, or would you fight for what's right?
Those are heavy questions. Questions we should be asking not just about history, but in our own lives, our communities.
Exactly. Because silence is complicity. Apathy is a luxury we can't afford. We have a responsibility to speak out, to challenge that hatred, to stand up for those who are marginalized, who are oppressed.
And to remember those small acts of kindness. Just like Schindler, we might not be able to save the world, but we can make a difference in the lives around us. We can be that force for good, even when things are dark.
And that is a powerful message. I think that's the heart of Schindler's List. It's not just about the past, it's about our responsibility in the present.
Now, we've talked a lot about the good, the impact, the message, but no film is perfect, right? Even a masterpiece like this, there are flaws. We got to acknowledge that.
Right, you are right. And one of the most common criticisms is that it focuses too much on Schindler, that good German narrative, and that it does it at the expense of the Jewish victims.
So it oversimplifies a really complex history. It makes it seem like one man saved the day.
Yeah, and others say it romanticizes Schindler. He was complex, yes, but also deeply flawed. I mean, he was in it for the profit, for himself at first. The film does acknowledge that, but the question is, does it go far enough?
Does it give enough voice to those he saved, their experiences? Does it really capture the horrors they faced, the trauma that stayed with them, even after they were liberated?
These are important questions, and it's crucial to remember Schindler's List is just one interpretation of this incredibly complex and tragic history. It's a starting point, but it's not the end.
So where do we go from here? What other perspectives do we need to be aware of?
Well, centering the experiences of the survivors, their testimonies, their memoirs, these are firsthand accounts. They experienced that cruelty and that resilience.
They lived through it. Those stories have insights that a film, no matter how good, can't capture.
Right. And their stories are often more nuanced, more complex. They challenge us to see the full spectrum of human experience during the Holocaust, not just the heroes or the villains, the everyday struggles, the resistance, the small acts of kindness that gave people hope.
So while Schindler's List is a powerful place to start, it's important to go beyond it, to find those other perspectives, to engage with a wider range of voices and stories.
Exactly. The Holocaust wasn't about one man, one list. It was the systemic, organized attempt to wipe out millions of people, based on religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, their belief.
And it's a history we can never forget, not just for the victims, but for all of us, for our own humanity.
Complacency is dangerous. We have to be vigilant, to fight against injustice whenever we see it, to stand up for the rights of all people. These lessons from the Holocaust, they're not just about the past, they're about our responsibility today, to create a world where these atrocities can never happen again.
It's a heavy responsibility, but it's one we all share. And I think Schindler's List, for all its flaws, serves as a powerful reminder of that. It's a film that stays with you. It makes you think. It challenges you to be better, more compassionate.
It asks those tough questions, makes us confront uncomfortable truths. And sometimes that's what we need, to be shaken out of that complacency, reminded of how fragile peace is, how dangerous intolerance is, and how important it is to stand up for what's right.
We've talked about the technical brilliance of Schindler's List, its impact on education, how it succeeds, how it falls short. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift the focus back to you, the listener.
What resonates with you most about this film? What thoughts and emotions does it bring up? What questions does it raise for you about your own role in the world? About your responsibility to fight injustice, to promote compassion?
Because at the end of the day, Schindler's List isn't just a film to watch passively. It's a call to action, an invitation to really engage with history, to confront your own biases, to choose to be a force for good.
And that is a journey we all have to take, individually and collectively. It's not easy, but it's necessary.
Wow, we've really gone deep on Schindler's List, huh?
Yeah, we have.
From Spielberg's, brilliant direction to, well, the film's take on history, even those flaws we talked about. It's a movie that really sticks with you.
It does, even all these years later.
And I think that's what great art does, right?
It does.
It stays with you, makes you think, challenges how you see things.
Absolutely.
And Schindler's List certainly does that. I remember the first time I saw it, it was like a punch to the gut.
Yeah.
The black and white, that score, the
Yeah.
emotion, you could just see it on their faces. It all felt so real.
Spielberg really wanted to bring the Holocaust to life for modern audiences, make it something they could connect with. Think he succeeded.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just, those dates and names in a textbook.
No.
These were real people. They had families, dreams, hopes, and they were systematically murdered. It's heartbreaking.
And that's why it's so important to keep those stories alive, right? To remember them, to honor those who survived, to learn from the mistakes that were made.
We can't let ourselves forget, can we? Become
No.
complacent. We have to be, vigilant, challenge hatred and prejudice wherever we see it.
You're absolutely right. Schindler's List isn't just a history lesson, It's a call to action. It asks us, what would we do if we were in that situation? Would we just stand by and watch? Or would we put ourselves at risk to help?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
And there's not an easy answer.
No, there isn't.
But it's a question we all have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Because this, fight for justice, for equality, for compassion, it's never over.
No, it's not.
It's happening, not just on battlefields or in politics, but in our everyday lives, how we treat each other.
It's happening all around us. And I think that's the real legacy of Schindler's List. It's not just remembering. It's about, shaping the future. Recognizing that humanity in every person, regardless of, their race, their religion, anything. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Even when it's dangerous. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here, I want to leave you with a few thoughts.
Okay.
First, if you haven't seen Schindler's List, you really should.
Yeah.
It's a tough watch. but it's important. It'll stick with you.
We will.
And remember, the Holocaust wasn't just some random event.
No.
It was the result of centuries of anti-Semitism.
Of hatred, of intolerance.
All allowed to just fester and grow.
Right. We have to be aware of those kinds of ideologies.
We have to challenge them when we see them, because those seeds of hate, they're still being planted today. Different forms, different places.
Mm-hmm.
But, we have to be vigilant. Stand up for what's right. Make sure that history doesn't repeat itself.
It's so important.
And finally, don't forget that even the smallest act of kindness can make a difference.
Oh.
Like Oskar Schindler. You might not be able to save the whole world, but you can make things a little bit better for someone.
Absolutely.
You can choose to be good, to spread compassion, to try and, build a world that's a bit more just, a bit more equal.
A little bit better.
That's a powerful message, and it's really at the heart of this film.
It is.
Schindler's List, it reminds us, I think, of how dark things can get, what humanity is capable of. But it also reminds us of the light,
Yeah.
of how strong we can be, and of hope.
Even in the face of, true evil.
That's a message worth holding on to, isn't it?
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Schindler's List.
Yeah.
We hope you got something out of it,
We hope you see this film in a new light.
and that it stays with you.
Thank you.